24-hour clocks. In this unit, we're going to discuss telling times on a 24-hour clock. When times are shown using a 24-hour clock, the AM and PM are no longer used. Instead, the time continues to count up. Midnight is 0000 hours, and the morning hours count up the same as a 12-hour clock. Noon is 1200 hours. But the afternoon hours continue to count up. So 1 o'clock p.m. would be 1300 hours. Here are the same first few examples from the last topic, but with their 24-hour time period provided. This one says Elizabeth is going for a hike in the morning at 7 o'clock a.m. How should she write the time using a 24-hour clock? She would write it as 0700 hours. A couple things to note. The 2 digits are used for the hours, and 2 digits are used for the minutes. So since 7, it typically is a single-digit number, a 0 is placed in front of the 7 for a placeholder to maintain the consistency of using a 2-digit number. So we'd read that as 0700 hours or 700 hours. Our next example, Keith's soccer game is after school at 3 o'clock p.m. How should he write the time using a 24-hour clock? He would write that as 1500 hours. He would take 12 o'clock noon plus add 3 hours for 3 o'clock in the afternoon to get a total of 1500 hours. As stated in the last topic, sometimes an event starts in the morning, AM, and ends in the afternoon, PM, as in the examples below. We leave for lunch at 11:55 a.m. and return to the classroom at 1:10 p.m. How would we write both of these times in 24-hour notation? 11:55 a.m., since it is before noon, we write it as a 4-digit numeral, 11:55 hours. For the 1:10 p.m., we add 12 to the 1 and express that as 1310 hours. Here's another scenario. If you fall asleep at 9:30 p.m. and wake up at 5:30 a.m., how are both of these times written in 24-hour notation? For the 9:30 p.m., we would add 12. 1200 plus 930 would be 2130 hours. And the 5:30 is before noon, 12 noon, so we would write it as a 4-digit number without the colon. So the two ways to write the hours would be 9:30 p.m. would be 2130 hours, and 5:30 a.m. would be 0530 hours. Converting 24 hours to 12 hours. 24-hour times can also be converted to 12-hour times. Here's a sample. If a tennis match begins at 11:30 hours on a Saturday and ends at 1400 hours, how would we write both of these times in 12-hour notation? Well, for the 11:30 hours, that is before 12 o'clock noon, so we would keep it as 11:30. For the 1400 hours, we would take 1400 and subtract 1200 to get 2. So our final answer for this problem would be 11:30 a.m. since it's before noon, and 2 o'clock p.m. since it's afternoon. Another example. If you fall asleep at 2200 hours and wake up at 0800 hours, how are both of these times written in 12-hour notation? Well, 2200 hours is on a 24-hour clock. On a 12-hour clock, that would be written as PM. So to convert it to PM, I would take 2200 and subtract 1200 to get 10. So this would be 10 o'clock at night. For the 8 o'clock, that's before noon, so that would be written as 8 o'clock. So the final answer would look like this. 2200 hours would be 10 o'clock p.m., and 0800 hours would be written as 8 o'clock a.m. Time intervals. A time interval is the amount of time between two specific points in time. Time intervals can be used to measure how long an event requires. They are calculated by subtracting the starting time from the ending time. Here's an example. If we leave for lunch at 11:55 hours and return to the classroom at 13:10 hours, how long did we eat lunch? So the ending time was 13:10. The starting time was 11:55. So we subtract the starting time from the ending time. It would look like this. 13:10 minus 11:55 is 01:15 hours. Remember, in 24-hour clock, the first two digits represent the hours. The next two digits represent the minutes. So splitting this up accordingly, 01:15 hours would look like 1 hour and 15 minutes. Now let's turn our attention to the second example. If a tennis match begins at 11:30 hours on Saturday and ends at 1400 hours, how long did the match take? Again, the starting time is 11:30 hours. The ending time is 1400 hours. And to calculate the time interval, you subtract the starting time from the ending time. Here's the setup. 1400 minus 1130 results in 0230 hours. The first two digits represent the hours. The last two digits, 30, represents the minutes. So 0230 hours can also be expressed as 2 hours and 30 minutes. The match took 2 hours and 30 minutes to play. Sometimes when calculating time intervals, the hours need to be regrouped to take into account the next 24-hour period. Here are two examples to illustrate that point. If you fall asleep at 21:30 hours and wake up at 05:30 hours, how long were you sleeping? So keep in mind, 21:30 hours is on one day. You sleep or wake up until 05:30 hours on the next day. That's a 24-hour period has gone by. Even though you didn't physically sleep for 24 hours, we somehow have to account for that next day. The dilemma really shows up when we do it with arithmetic. If we subtract our starting time from the ending time, we have 0530 minus 2130. And the dilemma we see is that 0530 is smaller than 2130. So if we were to subtract, we have a negative number. We want to avoid that. So to keep into account that we're on to the next 24-hour period of time, I would take my 5:30 in the morning and add 24 to get 29. And that's how we rewrite 5:30 in the morning as 29:30. We regroup it so that we have enough. Basically, you're borrowing, so you have enough to subtract 29:30 minus 21:30. It gives us 0800 hours. Or for simplicity's sake, we can say you slept for 8 hours. Let's take a look at another example. If you fall asleep at 2200 hours and wake up at 0800 hours, how long were you sleeping? Once again, we're going to subtract our starting time from the ending time. Okay, so we slept at 2200 hours on one day. We wake up at 0800 hours on the next day. So when we go to subtract, we have a dilemma. This is smaller. 0800 is smaller than 2200. So in order to make it so we can subtract, we're going to take into account that we have a 24-hour time period. We've moved into the next set of 24 hours. So I'm going to add 24 plus 8 will give me 32. And I'm going to rewrite this 800 as 3200. So now I can subtract 3,200 hours minus 2,200 hours is 1,000 hours, or in simplicity, more simple English, we say 10 hours. You slept 10 hours that day.